Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Fermpe Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. Are you looking for a high impact strategy that you could incorporate into any assignment or project in any discipline to help your students learn deeply? Well, you want to stay tuned to today's episode because our guest, Dr. Melony Shemberger, will be providing us with insights to do just that. Dr. Shemberger, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here.
Great. So I'm going to yield the floor to you for a moment to just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure. So I am Melony Shemberger. I teach journalism and mass communications. I am an associate professor at Murray State University, and I'm in the middle of my 6th year of teaching journalism courses.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. And we're going to get right into your strategy now. And the title of your strategy is Using Oral History Interviews in Any Discipline as High Impact Practice. Now, I imagine that someone might be listening to this episode and they might be thinking, well, I shouldn't really continue to listen because I really can't see how oral history would apply to my course or it could help my student to learn. Could you help us understand what impressed you to start using this strategy and how has it worked for you?
Exactly, sure. So that is one thing I want to go ahead and dispel, that you hear the phrase oral history and automatically we are thinking in the context of history courses. And that is, while it does stem more from the history curriculum, the beauty of it is it can apply to any discipline. So in my case, I teach a specific course called In-Depth Reporting. It's an intermediate level course in our journalism curriculum. And when I started teaching this course for the very first time, we would go through a number of various writing exercises, but I felt as though the students weren't really making the connection into really what does in-depth reporting mean. And it wasn't until I came across a news organization called StoryCorps, and that is what they do. They use oral histories to help build their news stories as well as other collections. And that's kind of when the bell went off in my head that, wow, I think I could do this. So I first imagined it as a part of a large project, semester-long project. And that is what we did in that course. I was able to obtain some grant funding to be able to purchase equipment for the students to use to create their oral history interviews. And then another part of the project was that students had to present their work at Scholars Week, which is a week-long celebration of scholarship at Murray State University. So it was the way to make that connection for students to the content, to really understand it better, and to also see how professionally we're having to think a little differently in terms of how we disseminate our news content. Readers, viewers, audiences today in almost any field, they want content delivered in a number of ways. They don't always just want to read stories or hear stories. They kind of want an experience, if you will. And I think, at least for me, the oral history interviews help to create that. Now, for anybody else in another discipline, the oral history interviews are crucial to understanding historical context in your field, maybe even to understanding a trend that might be happening in your area. So it has a lot of wide-ranging impact.
Yes, and I could definitely see that when you're talking about really helping students to understand the historical context or even trends. That really sounds like a good strategy. So I know we're going to get into the strategy a little bit more, but just overall, what has students' response been to this strategy?
So as you can imagine, anytime you tell students the word project, they're going to hesitate a little bit. The enthusiasm at first from students did not equal my enthusiasm. I was really high-strung about this project, as you can imagine. It was near the end, though, this is where it really came out. So during Scholars Week, students would share their experiences, and a lot of them were very grateful to have done an interview, had to transcribe an interview, and then what I had them do with the interviews was then write news stories from those interviews. So in another discipline, they could do maybe a writing reflection. But for my students, they actually had to put together a news story based on that interview, but they had to also transcribe it. The thing that students indicated more was how they understood the topic a little bit more effectively. They also, and I've had a couple of students say this, and this is where I think this proud professor moment really came in for me, was when they saw it as a way to expand even beyond academics. A couple of the students mentioned how because they have aging family members, they see oral history as a way to even just to tell their family's history, or they even saw it in another application to use in a community project. So it was an eye-opening experience on two levels for the students. One, to really understand the content better. And what we did in my course, we focused on 3 different semesters on education reporting. We focused on a problem in education and then built our oral histories around that. So they understood the content better. That was the very first connection there. And then the second thing was that they saw how valuable oral history interviews could be and how they could apply it to almost anything else that they do from here on out, whether professionally or personally.
Wow. From what you're saying, it seems as if the students really found this experience meaningful, Dr. Shemberger.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some really rich meaning for them. And not only that, but these oral history interviews, that's their product that I also put then on a website. So they always have a way to show their work. I always want to make sure students have some sort of outcome when they leave my class. So that way it lives on and they're able to show in their portfolio or just show someone that, hey, look what we did. I can use oral histories.
Wow. So let's get right now into more of the implementation of the strategy. What is required for students to use oral history interviews?
So for the oral history interviews, really, because we are in a wonderful digital age today, they can use their cell phones to record an interview. I had one student who was able to record her interview via a telephone, just to be able with the interviewee on the other end of the phone. So I do ask that they try to make them face-to-face, because I think that's where you get to see the expressions of the person, you get to see their environment, but I do understand that sometimes that's not possible. So I even recommend a Zoom or Skype, so if they want to do it that way, that's also very effective. We actually did that my very first semester and it worked really well. The other thing is, I mentioned the grant funding earlier. So with the grant funding, I was able to purchase equipment, and here's one piece of that. It was a Tascam audio recorder. These are really good, high quality recorders, but money is money. So I know not everybody can have that. But again, the phone works fine. Any kind of video conferencing tool works just as well. But the students, that's the equipment they have to have pretty much. And then the ability to, of course, replay that interview. So being able to listen. And then I had the students go through the exercise. It may have been arduous, but they went through the exercise of transcribing word for word the questions as well as the responses. And the reason why is because I explained to them that the oral history interview is not just for you to write your news story. I want these oral history interviews also to live in the world of scholarship so that anyone can access them. And if they don't have the technology to play it back, they at least have the transcript to read what was contained in that interview. So as far as the technology is concerned, just something to record. That's really what the student will need. And then also, the other thing is for students to be able to give themselves plenty of time. I mentioned this project day one in the course. I have it all ready, but we all know that students are going to kind of wait. So I always parcel the assignment down into parts where they have to have questions ready. These oral history interviews are not just conversations. I mean, they can be, but they have to be structured. So we really want the interviewee to respond in essay-like responses, because that's where the real personality is going to come out. That's where the information is going to be really insightful from the interviewee. So there's just a lot of those types of nuggets that are explained early on and that I do work with students in the classroom about. But the technology, really just something to record. That's the very basic thing.
Okay, so thanks for sharing that. And it was interesting that you mentioned that the assignments, the projects live not only within your circle with the students, but other people are able to see these assignments?
That's correct. So there is a website that I organize. It's called kyeducationstories.omeka, OMEKA.net. And there, when people access that website, they can see a photo of the interviewee. They can see the transcript if they click on a particular interview. They will then see the audio file, which is housed in a Google Drive. So they're able to see all those components, and then also the news story at the end. So they're able to see all of that put together for that interview subject. Now, this is the part of assignment that, anybody who's wanting to do this, you don't have to do that. But because I am in journalism with media, we've got to have at least that part of the assignment to make it more of give it the full effect, if you will.
Wow, that's good. And I know towards the end of this interview, you're going to be sharing some resources, but that could actually be an example that people could look on if they would like to see an example of what you do in the context of your course. So what type of instruction needs to take place before students begin? How do you help your students to prepare them to do these?
Right, yeah. So when we're doing oral history interviews, we don't want to tell students, okay, go find a subject, put together your questions and go at it. We don't want to do that. So what I do with my students in the first week, I schedule some little field trips, if you will, to our archival library, Pogue Library at Murray State University, which really is just a couple buildings down from where I am. And there the students will meet with the librarian who can kind of share with that person what it's like to really kind of dig into some of the artifacts, whether it be old documents, letters, books, whatever the archival system might have for them. So as I mentioned earlier in my course, we focused on education, specifically education before the days of standardized testing took full effect. And I wanted students to be able to find out really what education was like, because all they have known, especially in the public school system, is testing. Well, and by interviewing various people throughout the past 3 semesters, it's been some wonderful stories that a lot of our interview subjects have shared. So before these interviews took place, they spent that week at the library, going through just anything that might be related to the topic of education. Students got to see some old photographs of old schools in the Murray-Callaway County area. They were able to see report cards from people who have lived in the area. I mean, and how those report cards they were something. Class schedules, yearbooks, I mean, just all of that stuff to kind of get an idea. So that's one of the things I would recommend to anybody wanting to implement this. Find out the context of the topic or the problem that you're wanting your oral histories to focus on. The second thing is that oral histories, really there are 2 types. One is passive and one is active. So passive is already a collection of oral histories that exist. So in this case, my students in the past 3 semesters on the kyeducationstories.omeka.net website, that's already some passive oral histories. Anybody can access them and anybody can listen to them. So I had students listen to some and listen critically. For instance, what was the sound like? Were you able to understand what the interviewer was asking? And did you understand well the interviewee's responses? What would you have done differently? What questions were not asked? So we went through a critical listening exercise with passive oral history interviews. And then the active oral histories are what they did eventually, would be getting that interview recorded.
Wow. So, field trips are always good. And you're saying that you take your students to the library and you expose them to different types of oral history, Now, what are some practical activities, some actually practice activities that students could engage in? Because I know to do an assignment like this, perhaps students might be saying, wow, this is a big project. How do I do it? Even though Dr. Shemberger gave me the instructions, I want to have some low-stake activities that I could just test things out.
Oh, absolutely. So in addition to just listening to some passive oral history interviews, in which we did in class, and then I also had them they got to choose one on their own, whether it related to education or anything, just they had to find one, and I provided some resources for them to find one. So that's one. The second thing that the instructor can do is parcel out this particular assignment into chunks. So number one, they would have to think about at least 3 individuals whom they would like to interview for the subject or for the topic. So in my area of education reporting that the students focused on, it could be in anybody, parents, because parents play a big role in education. What do parents who maybe even, if my parents were still living, if they were to interview one of mine, that's going way back. What were their education days like? Teachers. Some teachers can recall well the days before they had to really concentrate on standardized tests. Principals, even students, so just a wealth of people. It did not matter to me if the students chose family members, because I don't find that to be really a problem in this particular project. Mm-hmm. So they were encouraged to do that if they felt comfortable. Some did not. Some were able to find a complete stranger, and that was okay. So again, getting those assignments, are really broken down into small pieces, starting with the interview subjects and then moving to questions. Well, first research. So they had to research a little bit more about that person and then come up with some questions. That would have been like a second assignment the students had to do. Mm-hmm. And then once they got those questions submitted, I would review them, give them some feedback on those. And then the third one was, okay, now let's schedule the interview. And how are you going to do this? Do you need to check out one of the Tascam audio recorders? Is your phone capable of doing this? If not, let's test it right now. So we went through a lot. We just broke things bit by bit. And that way it was not so overwhelming for them in the end. Wow. But I did set up those small parts as low stakes assignments.
Okay, great. And for someone listening who is not familiar with the whole concept of low stake assignment, what did that look like? You already described it, but in terms of on a scale, for example, if the big assignment was worth a certain amount, how much would the low stake assignment would be worth in relation to that?
So I would actually kind of built it up a little bit. So the first few assignments would be worth anywhere between 10 to 15 points. And then really the project overall was worth quite a bit at 200 points, because that included a number of things. They also had to get a photo of the person. And the transcript was a part of it, the news story, the audio file, and then their presentation at Scholars Week.
Great. So it's good that the low stake assignments, the points were not too many so that the students would feel comfortable doing it. But at the same time, you have something to keep them accountable.
Exactly.
So that they would do it.
Right.
Okay. So it seems as if this project has been going well with you. Are there any challenges that you encountered along the way?
So some of the challenges actually were more from my end, because especially in the beginning. Now, the very first semester was difficult. I had a large number of students. For a skills-based class, that was a little too much for me. I had 18 when I'm used to having anywhere between 12 to 15 students, and sometimes not even that. Mm-hmm. So the challenge is maybe size. You want to make this project, sometimes you might need to make this project into a group project. So that's what we did the very first semester. I had students grouped together in 3 groups, and one would be in control of the questioning of the interviewee. Another person was taking photos. Another person even was taking enough notes to make this a social media type project. So they were sharing what our interviewee was telling us about. So group projects can be, really a good part of this as well. And then the remaining 2 semesters that I've used this, smaller classes. So then I had students do their own oral history interviews. And actually, probably what you can see behind me is a series of posters that we have also put out into the community So people who see these posters, they can go up to them with their cell phone. If they have a QR reader, then scan over that. And then they can
Wow.
hear the interview while looking at the picture if they wanted to do that. So a lot of the challenges were more from my end, the technical aspects of it. It is a lot of busy work, but it is so rewarding. I mean, the students, like I said, in the end, that's when they realize what a valuable experience this has been. And I enjoy it. People in the public who have seen this project, they enjoy it, who've accessed the website, they appreciate it. I've had a few scholars even indicate they appreciate the additional interviews that are out there that they can use for their research or whatever. So it's been great, but that's the major challenge. Now, challenges for students, really it is about that time. It's just that time aspect for them. They think that transcribing is not a big deal, but for many students, it takes them a good week to transcribe even an interview of 20 to 30 minutes. They didn't realize how tedious that might be. So those would be the big things that I think an instructor wanting to incorporate this high impact practice into their instruction might want to take into stock and just be able to be prepared for that.
Yeah. I could really see how time could be a challenge when you're implementing this strategy. And personally, as a student, I remember having to do a similar assignment where I had to literally interview an individual and transcribe it. And it really took more time than I anticipated. So I imagine that's something that you really prepare your students for, that this could really take more time than you think. And so we have heard about the successes that are associated with this strategy, and we have also heard about the challenges. So if someone who is listening to this episode and they are really interested in using this strategy, but they're a little bit hesitant, what would you say to encourage them just to really get their feet wet into this strategy?
So really first start small. Now, of course, anybody watching this will see, wow, I just don't have that kind of time, and that's just not where I want to put my resources. But really just start small. What I mean by that, the passive oral history interview. There are many passive oral histories out there, and I'm sure whatever's relevant to your field, there's probably some sort of collection that might already exist. But start there and be able to share with students really what people who have recorded their thoughts, their insights, their experiences on audio or on video have to really share about the field. So I came across, when I was doing some research on oral history interviews, because I have written a couple of articles about my experiences, one of the things I found was in the healthcare field and how they use oral history interviews to really document various conditions going on with certain populations. And I thought, wow, okay, so that's, one area that is really helpful to use oral history interviews. But just start small. So maybe passive, just have students listen to some. And then when you're ready to take on the challenge of really working to have students complete their own oral history interviews, if you're still unsure, about every college or university has a history department, and there's somebody there who is so willing to help. Anybody wanting to take on these types of projects, they can help you structure them. That is also how I found out more about transcribing oral history interviews, was at a history conference, and the historian was more than willing to share examples and templates. So you can definitely take them into consideration to help you, offer a little co-teaching opportunity there.
Wow. And speaking of examples, are there any resources that you would recommend that our viewers could review to help them along this journey?
Sure. So I did mention history professors because they really know how a lot of this works. I think a second good resource really is right there on your campus with the library. Make sure, kind of check to see what your library offers in terms of archives. See if they offer any kind of oral histories that might reside on their website, or if they have still the tapes that you can access or check out. That way you can kind of hear about things. So I have mentioned about my research opportunities with this. So I have written a couple of articles. I had a teaching article released last summer in the publication called Teaching Journalism and Mass Communications Journal. You can look for that online actually and download it as a PDF. So it is open access, and be able to read my thoughts on that. Even just Googling oral history interviews would be effective as well. I've also presented this at the Pedagogicon conference. I presented these posters actually May of 2018, and my article about that experience was published in the Pedagogicon proceedings. So that also is available. So there were some examples there. Like I said, the healthcare profession, they use oral history interviews to be able to document stories, so that way they can process what could be trends coming up in their field to really watch for. So there's a wealth of them. And then again, I can't stress enough that the history department.
And we could list the title of those publications that you mentioned earlier in the description box for this video. And also, you had mentioned a link to your students' assignment. Do you want to share that link again? Just to
Sure. It's kyeducationstories.omeka.net. And Omeka is spelled OMEKA. It's a different kind of website. It's more in tune with the metadata is what it focuses on, and that's what it wants to capture. Because again, we want people to be able to really access our material and use it. So that's really that's why the Omeka server, it sounds different. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shemberger. Within this last minute, if you have a final encouragement or challenge for our viewers, what would you say to them?
So oral history interviews is a great way to either collaborate. You can also just be able to use it as a way for students just to dig deeper on a particular topic. And also it could be, if you really want to expand this project, it could be a great community engagement opportunity for your students to be able to produce something like this and share it in a public library, share it in, whatever your field is, maybe in the hospital or in the schools. You can make this as large as you want to be with it, but every small part you do with this, it's going to have a great impact for students to really realize how valuable and meaningful the experience will be.
Wow, well said. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shemberger, for taking the time to share with us today. You provided us with some great insight, and I hope our viewers will be able to use many of them. And to our viewers, I would like to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And please feel free to share this video with others. And we hope that you will join us for the next episode of This Works For Me Virtual Summit. See you soon.